It's okay to be scared, but you don't always have to default to religious beliefs. I am your host, Devon, and you are listening to another episode of Center of the Sun Podcast. Thank you for listening. Having faith is an excellent coping mechanism. Let's preface this whole conversation. But in the face of the coronavirus and Jay-Z's dumbass centering himself again with the public service announcement and then not talking about anything that Colin Kaepernick was protesting against. But anyway, I would say all of these things are better than smoking cigarettes and drinking alcohol, but you can have your white God and your football and all that kind of stuff, but I'm going to be against it. Personally, all paths lead to enlightenment ultimately, and enlightenment leads to your soul's development. So, even lack thereof, that's fine. How are you doing? That's okay. All of that's fine. How are you doing today? The purpose of my soul development, I'm going to tell you right now, is to find those unique things about myself and to share them with you and other humans, of course. And that might be your purpose too. How are you doing? Thank you for listening to Center of the Sun Podcast. I'm your host, Devon, and finding, one's purpose sometimes requires more than one go round within this reality, and that's okay. How can you confirm any of what I'm saying is true anyway? Well, first, before I continue on, I wanted to share something that I learned from the New York Times, or not the New York Times, ABC News. Sorry, I unsubscribed to the New York Times. I'm probably going to resubscribe, but they reported a while back that there was a coalition between Jay-Z and the NFL airing public service announcements. I don't know, but basically this coalition called the Responsibility Program, they launched it in November 2019, and it is focused on issues of criminal justice reform, police and community relations, and economic and educational advancement. I think they slipped in the police thing because they knew that I would read it out loud on this show, because they have not addressed it at all. They have only centered themselves as experts in this. I don't know what the fuck, but basically Colin Kaepernick, just to clarify the whole situation and why I'm even talking about it, police brutality in the United States and in the world in general is really bad. And Colin Kaepernick chose to use his freedom of speech and on the largest platform that he has, which is the fucking NFL field, to protest police brutality and the fact that not only are people dying at the hands of the police are not being held accountable, and neither is government. So this is the route through which Colin Kaepernick chose, and the NFL chose in response to systematically discriminate against him, which is their prerogative because he has sued and had court cases and all kind of stuff. But what we're not going to turn around and do is act like they didn't do it. So Jay-Z, unfortunately, fuck you. I'm like, and it is what it is. If this is the path you chose, I've always been against like all violent contact sports anyway. So I never supported the NFL, and now I'm just like, really? All of the work he did, all of this, he sacrificed his whole career so that you can just come and act like it was something else, and act like black people haven't already been addressing interpersonal gun violence in the black community. So people have been protesting against gun violence forever. it would have been wise to partner with somebody already doing it, but you chose the NFL. So fuck you and your business. So anyway, thank you for listening to Sender of the Sun. I wanted to touch on that because I'm just angry at that. And I don't think that's Jay-Z's life's purpose, is to do this. I think he's being very greedy and very capitalistic or whatever it is, and just going for the lowest hanging fruit. And it's not sustainable, unfortunately. So if it is sustainable, then my version of reality is not sustainable. So somebody's wrong. And, sometimes it takes a few times. It takes a few tries. You have to make a lot of mistakes and you have to apologize a lot. And I feel like he's going to come back around and he's going to be like, "Ooh, that was a bad idea." But how can you confirm anything in life? It's true. We're having a coronavirus outbreak. The coronavirus is in the same family as SARS and MERS and all the other shit that we've already been through. So it doesn't seem scary in the fact that it will be fatal to so many people, but it's scary in the fact that our government didn't respond in the appropriate time and that they still don't know what the fuck they're doing. So I'm just a little confused. I'm just a little confused, which is fine. We're going to get through this, but how do you know you're going to get through it? Why do you tell yourself "Oh, we're going to get through it. It's going to be fine." And it's not because you have just blind faith. It's because you have evidence and you have data and you have information that helps you make decisions about how to feel. So in response to all of this, police brutality, whatever the fuck it is, people tend to default to, "Oh, as long as I got King Jesus, I don't need nobody else." But I'm just from my perspective, King Jesus is the reason why we're here. And not Jesus specifically, but that's the tradition that I was raised in. All organized religions that suspend any form of logic, that is it bothers me. I can't even get it out. It's just it's so illogical that anybody would choose this path. And I chose it at a certain point in time. So there's nothing wrong with it. There are many things wrong with it, but there's nothing ultimately inherently bad. And you'll realize what I'm going to say because I wanted to continue on with numerology. We've been talking about numerology. We've been talking about numbers specifically and kind of how ancient people in the last, and when I say recently, I mean the last 4 episodes, we've touched on various numbers with what ancient people believe have inherent qualities about them. And the more I research it, the more I kind of stumble upon maybe there are inherent qualities about numbers. And using a framework, how do we know anything is true? How do we know which framework to choose? And we've been talking about ancient people. We've been talking about numerology. We've been talking about esoteric energy. We've been talking about the soul. We've been talking about modern science and how it all connects and the human potential of all of that. And it's a privilege to be able to sit here and talk about all these things just like you would in college. And it got me thinking about oh my God, this is such a privilege. I get to sit around and just think deeply about the number 3. Oh my God, I don't have to think about trauma. I don't have to think about a coronavirus. I have a little bit of a worry about it in the back of my mind, but not really. And only because of the hysteria that's happening outside of my home. But generally, you kind of have to count your blessings and be you know what? But at the end of the day, I am not in I'm not in a war-torn country. I'm living, kind of in a safe thing. And it kind of reminded me college. And I just started to think about college because I'm going back to school this summer online. Thank God I have an online program, online only program. Thank God, Jesus. But anyway, Just liberal arts. It got me thinking about liberal arts and why the fuck is it called, why the fuck is it called liberal arts? Why do you study liberal arts in college? Like, what is a liberal art? Like, what is that? And the term liberal arts was defined a while ago. Like the term and the usage of like, what is a liberal art? And liberal arts have to do with this whole thing that we're talking about right now, that we've been talking about the last 4 or 5 episodes, just trying to connect the world with our consciousness. And you do that through various methods or various frameworks through which you think. Like, you specifically were just thinking. And that's what liberal arts are. Liberal arts are just the various ways that humans can critically think. And specifically, numerology is another form of a liberal art because of mathematics. Because it has to do with mathematics. And mathematics is a liberal art. It's a process through which you think. It's you process information. So I'm a part of all these groups online, chat groups, forums, all that kind of shit. Because I'm always like, I want to know what other people think. And that's kind of my framework, is just like, I just want to hear you, and then I want to think about what you said to me, and then like I want to create my own definition of like what I think you're talking about. So one of the groups that I'm a part of, they have a Discord server or something, and they have all these files and YouTube videos and stuff of stuff that they fuck with. And I stumbled upon a YouTube video, and I didn't watch it all because it's like I had to take notes. I had to stop and take notes, and then it was like he was talking too fast, so it took me like longer to take notes and da. So basically, there's this dude on YouTube, and I'll put this on my blog, devaughn.org, DVAUGHN.org. But he did a YouTube video called Living Natural Energies, and it was very interesting because he made a comparison. And lately I've been trying to dismantle classical notions of scientific truth, like particle theory and what Albert Einstein, the speed of light and all these things that we all learned in school that were just like truth. I'm finding that recently, like in the last decade, all of these ideas have been called into question. But I've been stuck on like string theory and like time-space continuum, and we've been stuck in a lot of things. But in Europe, it's been lit in Europe. They've been finding a whole bunch of new shit. And modern science basically has concluded recently that everything is a vibration. So we've gotten all the way down to string theory, and they've been able to like line up all of this information and be like, okay, we found the answer. Everything has a vibration. Everything is a tone. Everything is a part of a grand symphony or whatever the hell they think it is. And there's been good evidence. There's been good data. Large particle colliders in Europe are finding evidence of this vibration theory, that everything has a vibration. Everything has like a specific tone to it. And vibrations, when you put two vibrations together, they become one signal. And kind of like, this is kind of like how our world is developed. Like all of these different vibrations create bigger vibrations that create signals, and then those signals are received and by various forms of organic I don't know. It's just it's very confusing. And I think that's the gag, is that it's supposed to be confusing. So you kind of shut down and you default to, you know what? Let's just like, the Bible is easy to understand. The world was created in 7 days, and it all started by asking for light. And, like to a certain extent, you kind of have to start realizing that you default to certain things because they're easier. The path of least resistance, you tend to choose the path of least resistance. And it's not a bad thing, but it is also just a coping mechanism. And as a supreme being, you have to think in deeper ways. And sometimes the default is the protective layer of your consciousness, but you have to go deeper. And sometimes fear is a good thing, but if you don't use it as a tool of development, then it becomes like, I don't know. I don't know how to explain it, but basically let me read my notes because my notes make more sense. So in experiments done specifically to understand how plants communicate. And when I say plants communicate, I mean communicate with each other. I know you saw that movie, what is it called? Where the plants were killing people or whatever it was, or like even like fungi. If you look at the root system of fungus, you would be surprised that like literally all fungus is connected in the ground in some way. And they speak to each other through roots and through signals. Witnessing that and observing that process, scientists found that there are signals that don't follow traditional physics. So on one hand, they're like, everything has a vibration and like everything works like a machine and everything works on the electromagnetic scale. So everything can be like coded in an electrical way. But in the 60s, before they realized any of this, they were just connecting electrodes to plants and shit like that. And there are studies about all of this. And they figured out that they are observing signals going through these plants, but they're not coherent with each other. And in electricity, everything creates a coherence. Like if you put two waves, if you put two sounds together, it creates one new sound. But in a plant and in us as well, because we are made of the same biological stuff, that they observe two signals independent of each other, which is not impossible, which is supposed to be impossible, but it just gives evidence that something else is happening outside of our tools, outside of our ability to measure. So obviously our measurements are a little bit off. Certain aspects of life and consciousness potentially and evidently exist outside the bounds of modern science. And it's peculiar. It's very peculiar. And I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but all of this research kind of ended around 1994. You really don't have any papers or doctors or anybody talking about any of this after 1994. So I find that very abrupt. I find it very alarming that, you know, there was just kind of just this overall censoring, and now we're back. So the CIA, if you want to kill me, that's fine, but I'm going to say it. So back to like liberal arts, you know, so defaulting to religion is fine. Talking about God is fine. Talking about Jesus is fine, even though Jesus was not a real person and nothing in the Bible was real. It's all metaphoric for survival, human survival. That's why it's brilliant. But it's not people, places, or things. It has something else to do with inherent qualities about our reality and about certain aspects of our reality. It has something to do with us, but we don't. But the more we focus on the fact that you have to think about like, why would humans create a Bible of seemingly, okay, let's just logically think about like, it's not bad. So why, okay, so we know it's not bad, but like, why would it exist? If it's not bad, but it's not good, then why is it here? Why? So let's take the Bible or whatever religious text that you want to take. Why is it written like it's people and places and things? It's written like that so you remember it. It's written like that so you remember it. That's why it's a brilliant book. But you're a supreme being and you have the ability to look deeper and in between lines, and you can also recognize that it's been translated for 50 million fucking times, so you don't know what the original words were saying, but it's a pattern. And you check it against other frameworks. So there are other texts that match. You check it against that, okay? So why is Jesus a person? Why was Jesus born at a place? Why was he crucified on a thing? Like, why is it written like that? It's written because that's how our brains work. But there's something methodical about why it's written like that and why it's presented to you in such a way. So I just wanted to let's just clarify that. Like, I want you to like have fun and like have hope and have faith, but I also want you to be smart, and I want you to progress as a being. And the more you're trapped in Christianity, the longer you will be trapped. Oh, as a being in this reality. So like, let's talk about the liberal arts. Let's talk about college. Why is college important to you? Why do you go to college? Well, unless you're becoming like an engineer or something, like sometimes you go, specifically to learn a trade or something, but sometimes you just go to learn to think. That's really the reason why you go to college. And you go to think. You go to pick up grammar. You go to college to define things in an objective reality. That's what grammar does, and make sure that everybody's on the same page. We're all following the same rules about how we express ourselves. And there are some issues. People have issues with that because language changes, but that's why we need periods and commas and capital letters and stuff like that, because it helps us build upon our logic. Once you kind of have a system, your logic gives you the ability to process grammar, and it helps you get rid of false information and find the truth. So you start being able to check against it. So that's why when it's being translated, it's fine. Translations are fine as long as you're following grammar. And you have to know the rules of the old grammar in order to translate for the new grammar, so you can start building upon logic. And then once you have a logical understanding of what's going on, then you start building rhetoric, which is your speeches, is the ability to articulate and convey what you learned and what you now understand. Numerology and astrology and cosmology and all of these ologies, they are manifestations of a process that can help you better understand reality. So specifically, today we're talking about mathematics, numerology, as it has to do with the mathematics. If you talk to any electrician or anybody that does anything with electricity or the Duke Energy Center or whatever the fuck, numerology is also a framework through which we can code radio signals and all kind of stuff. It has more to do than just like spirituality. So today we're talking about mathematics. And in math class, you kind of learn how to count. You learn how to find things. You learn how to find answers to things. And you kind of start understanding, or you kind of start getting an understanding of like what numbers are and why do they seem to have deeper meanings than just for counting. For instance, for example, like you say you went to the Kroger because there's nothing else to fucking eat because it's the coronavirus season, and you pick up 5 apples and you say, I have 5 apples. That's counting, that's fine. That's one use of the number. You stand in line for 5 hours. You're still counting. It takes you 5, you drive down the street home 5 miles. You're still counting. You go home. You open your drawer. You have 5 knives in there. You pick out one. You use one to cut that apple. Cut one of those. You wash the apple off. You wash your hands. You wash the apple. You will probably wash it again. And then you cut the apple open with your clean hands because you just went to the grocery store, and you want to wash your hands when you get home. You want to take off your shoe. You want to get settled and then go touch the food. You cut the apple open. There's 5 seeds. at that point, are you counting? Like, what is the significance? Why are there 5 seeds in there? If you cut the apple open, the geometry of the core of this apple indicates that 5 can also be a quality. 5 can also almost be like a flavor. Numbers, seemingly, from just observing simple food or simple structures of food, there's a qualitative nature within themselves, within numbers themselves. There's something qualitative about it. There's something that doesn't have to do with counting. There's something 5 as a flavor, 5 as a quality. And that's what numerology, we've been trying to talk about numerology. Ancient people have been trying to connect numbers and qualities, and they've seemingly been successful. For example, geometry. There are certain shapes that are Plato, Plato, the philosopher, Platonic solids. They, back in ancient times or whatever it is, they discovered different shapes, like various like foundational things about our world, like music and how the planets move and stuff around us. The Pythagorean theorem, Pythagoras he created a framework for geometry. So specifically, Pythagoras created, what did he say? We were talking about grammar and logic and rhetoric. That's called the trivium. That's a framework through which you think. That's what college is built upon. College is built upon these frameworks that are trying to connect the qualities of reality to these seemingly like stupid things that we just learn as kids and think that they don't have any sort of meaning. But grammar is knowledge. Who, what, when, where. It's the building blocks of determining the facts of your reality. That's why language is so important. Logic is your understanding, and it puts that why and establishes valid relationships between facts, and the work of logic is proof. And I saw all of this in a YouTube video somewhere as well, kind of trying to explain this. Rhetoric goes on to convey that logic, and it brings you to what I was saying about music and stuff. That framework, once you start building logic and stuff, then you can start creating shit with it, and that's called the quadrivium. You start creating mathematics, you start creating systems and textbooks and abstract numbers and infinity, and you start thinking about all kind of crazy shit. And then you can start getting to geometry and start seeing that shit in the world and start being able to like build stuff and build bridges and solve problems and skyscrapers. And then you start being able to create art and music based on this shit. And then you start creating genres and businesses and celebrities on top of it. And then you start realizing that there's something spiritual with it. And cosmology and astrology become relevant. All of this started with just simply looking at the elements. How did anybody get to the point? How did you get to Taylor Swift or Lady Gaga or Beyonce? Like, how did we get to this point? It all started with looking at the elements, with looking at the world, with looking at viruses, looking at why people get sick, and start creating systems. Like last week or last episode, we talked about medical astrology. How did ancient people even come to the notion that a number has something to do with your health or what to avoid in order to stay healthy? They looked at the elements. What are the elements? Fire, water, rain and all that shit. Volcanoes and shit, fire, water, air, earth. You have whole children's TV shows about this kind of stuff, anime and all that kind of stuff to kind of teach people. But that's what Plato and Pythagoras was trying to show y'all, dumbass. That there are foundational numbers and elements and shapes and sounds that all kind of, they actually go together. Fire represents a four-sided, like a pyramid in nature. Water represents a 20-sided structure. Water's like super intense. Like water is that girl. Water is that thing. We're made out of water. Earth is its own element. It's made out of a 6-sided cube. If you open up a cube, and this is the crazy thing about Christianity, and this is why I'm talking about it today. The cube represents the earth. 6 sides. If you made a cube out of paper, or if you ever got a template for a cube, how to fold a cube, the template looks like a cross. It's like Christianity is like the greatest irony of this whole thing. It's like everything is we're worshiping the earth, and the earth is not a real thing. The earth is an element. We're the supreme beings. But anyway, that's where the symbol of the cross comes from. Anyway, the tree, Jesus died on a tree, the earth, all that kind of stuff. Carbon. Structures of carbon. It's all related. Anyway, earth, air is a kind of like a Star of David. If you made the star of like a 3D Star of David, an eight-sided star of David, if you put it in 3D. And then there's like another element that we've been ignoring for some time. It's called ether. And there's various types of ether, but that's also a 12-sided structure. And all of those structures that correspond to elements, that correspond to different kinds of shapes and different kinds of tones in our reality, those structures are observed in nature. When you look at the structure of water, you see a 20-sided thing. I don't know, shape. Or when you look at different molecules, you see triangles and stuff. You see these things in nature. You see these structures in nature. So where do they see them? Where can you actually see these structures in nature? Well, it's shapes. So for instance, like the shape of a flower, or the seeds, like 6-sided earth. You see that when a flower blooms. It blooms in a 5-sided shape, and the 6th side is the bottom or whatever. Like you have to think of it. You have to think of it in a kind of a different way. But people have observed these structures in nature since the beginning of time. The shape of how trees and flowers bloom indicate earth. Carbon structures of wood have 6 sides or whatever it is, 6 molecules or 6 particles or whatever it is. When there's certain conditions, you can look at ice, how ice forms in water, and scientists have observed super clusters of water with 20 sides, with molecules of ice, and they take it to atmospheric temperatures. They have to put it in, very cold conditions, but if you think of it, if the average person is majority water, and we are made of this like super intense particle, and there's special properties of water, wouldn't you also extend those properties to yourself? Water is the only chemical that does what other chemicals cannot do. And it acts like there are multiple different molecules in it, but it just has like various identities, and we don't quite understand it. But you can extend those same qualities to yourself, because you are made of all of these things too. Like you get hot. And when I say fire, it's warmth. Like we're talking about like this animation, this energy, the expending of warmth, which can turn into fire. You are made of all of these things. You're made of water, you're made of earth, you're made of air, you're made of fire, you're made of ether. And water acts like a living organism. Earth acts like a living organism, but we give it those qualities. And we specifically think Earth acts like a living organism because we can observe it adapt to various different changing conditions. Specifically, you already know the 3 phases of water: ice, liquid, vapor. And scientists have even found combinations of all of these things. Like there's ice water and ice vapors and liquid ice. There's all kind of different, like there's liquid water, certain temperatures of water, even though it's cold enough to freeze, it's still liquid. So scientists have not only been able to observe water in these various states and combinations of those states, ice, water, liquid, vapor, all that kind of stuff. They've even found liquid crystal, which is what we're made out of. Water is also a liquid crystal. And a liquid crystal is basically a structure of the molecules, like how the molecules are. It's very uniform. And we're majority water, so we can extend those same properties to ourselves. So if water can be a liquid crystal, and then we can also be a liquid crystal as well. Liquid crystals are very special because they absorb sunlight and use energy of the sun through chemical reactions. So like, how you have to go outside and get sun and get your vitamin D? How do you get your vitamin D? You get it because the water in your body absorbs the sunlight and uses it as a chemical reaction to create you, this experience that you're having. So when you default to religion, you start ignoring this entire process that your body is going through. And you don't even realize how you can even fight the coronavirus because you're like, oh, God's got it. Yeah, God's got it because like your body is amazing. Like you're a supreme being. So you can ignore it pretty much indefinitely and it'll still pretty much work fine. Your entire reality depends on how the sun and water react on a daily basis. So you'll be good. You'll be fine ultimately. And your body's directly affected by solar and geomagnetic or whatever electromagnetic pulses of the earth. But ultimately water comes from space, and we're going to hopefully touch on that in later episodes. Kind of like, why is all of this relevant? Well, it's relevant because we kind of have worked backwards. We didn't really realize the importance and the inherent qualitative nature of numbers. You didn't realize how important it was to you, and you start seeing the importance of numbers when you start looking at molecules of water and molecules of wood and molecules of rocks. You start seeing these patterns and these structures like, wait, it should be more confusing than this. It's a little bit stepped out because we kind of already know the Hindus and the Chinese and the Native Americans. They've already known all this stuff. They've known that like animals and plants and stuff, they all correspond to each other. So I don't know. Am I crazy? Send your thoughts. Host at centersun21.com. You can also visit my blog, Devon.org, and Devon is spelled DVAUGHN.org. Thank you for listening.